Before we get into this podcast, I owe you guys a massive apology for the delay and the time that it's taken to get this podcast uploaded. I had a number of stressful events happening in my life, which meant this podcast got put on the back burner a little bit. And so I owe you guys, the listeners, an apology. And I owe an apology also to Julia, my co-host, and to our guest, who we will introduce now. Again, I'm really sorry for the delay, and I hope you enjoy this podcast. I hope it's worth the long wait. Hello and welcome back to Ramped Up, the podcast all about disability. My name is George Sprouse.
My name is Julia Shenko.
So last week it was sort of my week to interview someone. Now it's Julia's turn. Julia, introduce our guest this week.
So today on our podcast, I have my good friend Natalie, who I met through secondary school. And when we first started up this podcast, actually, Joel, she was kind of the first person that came to mind in terms of getting them on the podcast. So I thought, why not today? All right, then. So Natalie, introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Natalie. I have cerebral palsy and general anxiety as the main two disabilities. With general anxiety also comes sensory processing disorder, mainly problems with loud noises and touch-wise. I use wheelchair and crutches to move around.
All right, okay. So me and you met through school, and even though we've known each other for not that long of a time, I would say, how was school in general for you throughout throughout education?
It's been a mishmash up and down. Primary wise, it was really based off of my parents. When it comes to friends, playtime, connection with other people my age and pupils in general. School was pretty much where I'm like having to being pushed to fit in sometimes because of how I see that a lot of the time if someone knows you really well, then they have problems. They struggle to adapt to your changes. And since obviously as a teenager now, and also before, because I had to grow up really fast because of many things that I can't do because of my disability being cerebral palsy and then my anxiety since I was 10, then I had to really grow up to seem as a okay person, so people didn't seem like, oh, what's wrong? Why are you acting differently?
And I kind of feel like when I was in school with you, you tended to struggle with saying, how you felt or like what you needed help with, if that makes sense.
Yes, because a lot of the time it's like what I found, sometimes it's been better, but sometimes still fine in school, is that I used to say something and then they're like, oh, but you don't need that. Why do you need that? Blah, 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 blah. So it ended up me...
In terms of help, is that what you're referring to?
In terms of help and in terms of just, I think like being listened to. It's been like, I would say to some of my able-bodied friends is that they would be like, oh, but you don't need that, or blah blah blah, and then it would be like, there's everyone's thinking they know me better than I am, so it ended up me being like, oh, you do whatever you want, and then I would be the one being on the internet finding ways to help myself.
Basically adapting around it. What they are giving you, just try and adapt around it.
Yeah, but then also like adapt around what they think is right when I'm around them, and like, do what they want me to do when I'm around them, in the sense of them wanting to help me. But then when I'm free, I would still, because the way they're seeing things would mostly be time half right, half wrong, and the other half I would be looking up ways to fix the ways that they couldn't fix because they wouldn't understand.
And I also kind of feel like, depending on the different type of disability that you have, sometimes people just don't understand that one way does not work for everyone. That they need to be able to be flexible about it.
And in my case, it also, I see they have trouble. Many people have trouble understanding with my cerebral palsy that the fact that it doesn't get doesn't develop more severely over time doesn't mean it doesn't change.
In what way?
In the way that many I can't give an example, but many disabilities, physical disabilities, if you don't do much with them, they can progress.
Oh, yeah.
In that sense. They don't understand that CP doesn't, but then they don't understand, they understand that part, but then they don't understand the fact that the needs can change. They're like, CP doesn't progress, so your needs technically they're like, your needs can't change if your diagnosis isn't changing, or
I mean, in some disabilities, I understand what you mean by that, and also I think it's also the fact that we, like, especially for me, through like when I started college, even I received extra help in things that I didn't know that I could get help with, if that makes sense. Like, that opened a whole new doors for me. And now that I'm going to university, when I had my assessment done, I literally told them about other, help that I've received in college, which was a lot more than I got in secondary school. I kind of also think that through our secondary school that we went to, there wasn't really much help given to disabled people. And saying that, also, we kind of were the only ones with severe disabilities, I feel like. While, majority of like the special needs
were autistic,
were mostly severe, which is autism and ADHD.
Yes.
So I feel like they concentrate a bit more on them rather than on us.
It sometimes comes to me like, because of how I'm under pressure, I'm like, shouldn't I change schools or something? Because the way they it's not even that they don't help special needs kids, it's when it's when as such you have other needs that aren't addressed as your main need, I would say.
Yeah.
People's needs aren't being met with equity, so people aren't given the help that they need.
Because with ADHD, obviously ADHD and autism probably and definitely have other needs, but they also have their own department. Departments
we were
in our
kind
school.
of thrown into the kids that needed like not as much help, I would say.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which then this also didn't help because this also didn't help in my turn because that just increased sometimes my anxiety.
Yeah,
As
trying to get
such.
help in anything was very hard.
Yes, because I think it was in year 8, if I'm not wrong, our Senko changed, and yeah, and that is I think it is hard for her to manage all those needs.
And I also kind of feel like people just see the physical disability and don't think about other disabilities that could come underneath it. Like, I remember when I spoke to you, like on messages or whatever, you kind of talked to me about how you didn't know that that disability pride covers quite a wide range of disabilities, and that like not everyone fits into one category. You kind of told me that you fit into multiple categories, which I think that's the beauty of, the disability community, is that nobody is put like in a fixated bubble. It's a bit more.
Whereas many people think that it's like in my terms, because there's 5 levels of cerebral palsy, and the lower on the levels you are, the less the less severe you are. So my friend that is in level 5, she would be like, she would be making sounds and stuff, but she can't. That's her only way of communicating. And I'm on level 3. I'm on level 3, and sometimes I make noises, and then people are like, "Oh, try control your noise, your sounds, because they know I can control them." And it's like, okay, I can control them, but it's not like, when people say that to me, it's like hiding myself, because it's like you're telling me to hide something that's part of me.
Yeah.
The same way with anxiety. For a long time, it would be like, try to be fine, don't talk about it, get home, cry yourself out.
Okay, and also, so that kind of goes into stereotypes, doesn't it? Where people think cerebral palsy is, to be honest with you, I didn't know much about different types of disabilities growing up. I mostly knew about my own. So for me, when I learned about cerebral palsy, I kind of imagine someone like your friend, for example. And I kind of feel like that's the beauty of growing up in like school. Because in school, like up until secondary school and college, I didn't know anyone with a disability, basically. So with you, I kind of clicked right away, because I'm like, oh, there's someone else that is not only in a wheelchair, but has a different condition than me, if that makes sense. And I think that's what made us click a lot in schools, doesn't it?
But then the really annoying part of it too is that if you look in social media, for example, and type in cerebral palsy, living with cerebral palsy, level 5 cerebral palsy are all the videos that come up.
So in terms of cerebral palsy, that's what everyone sees on social media.
Yes,
basically.
exactly. Okay. So it's hard to break that stereotype. Especially, and another stereotype that I really hate is that many people still think to this day, although this stereotype is weakening, it's still somewhere in our culture and in the 21st century, is that only autistic people stim. And I'm like, nope. I stim when I'm anxious.
So in school, were you ever bullied? Which I think is an obvious question for anyone with a disability. We were all bullied at one point in our lives. But, how bad was it for you, if that makes sense?
I've been bullied in a lot of situations, although I can't really remember a situation of school.
Have you been called names?
Not that I can recall. I have heard once a question from my primary friend, "Oh, are you adopted?" Or something. And I just turned around and said, "Nope, I'm from a normal family." I'm like, so what? Now every child with special needs tends to be adopted. Ouch.
Yeah, that one is not that good.
Yeah, because it infers that sort of your parents can't love you because you're different. I think that's really harmful.
Also, I feel that another stereotype that also comes with that is people kind of think of disabled people who are not wanted by their families, and that some people see adoption as a good idea to give away a child rather than get rid of it during a pregnancy, because let's be honest, not all disabilities you can find out about during pregnancy, so people just see that as a best option. And I feel like that's the most talked about thing in terms of disability is children getting put into adoption because their parents just can't live with the fact that they have a disabled child.
And that, looking back at that that question being thrown out wasn't even the fact of the question being thrown out. It was that fact that it was by a kid that was still learning, and it wasn't his fault he was asking. It would be a different thing if it was like a 15-year-old. I think that he was
genuinely curious, I guess.
9, yeah, and it was like, looking back at it now, I'm like, there's not enough awareness in. I'm not talking on YouTube or stuff, but put out in schools. They're like, "Oh, we're trying to help out kids with disabilities." Well, let other families know about different disabilities, and there'll be less bullying.
I also feel like that kind of question that you got asked, that had to be taught to them, that this is what happens to these types of children, if that makes sense. It's not something you learn from school. In school, they'll teach you that although everyone's different, we should all love each other, or at least tolerate each other to a certain extent. And the fact that a kid asks, "Are you adopted?" definitely raises a red flag of even adults aren't have that much awareness of the disabled community. So how was growing up with a disability like, aside from school in general?
Pretty harsh. I mean, from the age, well, for 4 years, so when I was 9 till 10, for that year, I totally shut down from any social activities.
What reason?
I just couldn't cope with the amount of people that you have to be someone to be accepted, and also the fact that I was still like at that point my anxiety started, so it was still trying to balance myself out in that sense. So yeah, and during at school, because of all my friends being and yeah, all my friends being family friends, we it was also hard for me to like establish where my place was, and especially during the end of school, it was primary school, it was hard.
Yeah.
Like the first true friends that I found, that I that I felt friends with, was one of my friends in primary school, but that was also put in by the TA. And then in secondary it was you, Jules. So yeah.
I mean, I don't know how it was for you in secondary school, but when I first started, I'm not gonna lie, I had a little bit of an identity crisis at that time, where I got bullied so much that it made me question. You know, the question when you get, it's like, oh, for me it will be, oh, don't you wish to walk and to be able to, you know, have a quote unquote normal life? That kind of comments, it hurts. And especially a teenager, because when you're a teenager, not only do you have hormones going inside you, not only do you have mental health problems, or like mental health problems or disorders, plus a physical disability where everyone picks on you, it kind of throws you in for a loop. Like, I remember for 2 or even 3 years, I just didn't know who I was, and I kind of also felt ashamed of my disability.
Yeah, that's a better word, a better wording to use between where I was between the age of 9 and 11. Yeah.
Natalie has the tendency, Joel, of not asking for what she needs. So there has been a few times where she would complain to me 1,000 times about a specific thing that is bothering her, and I'm just like, why don't you ask for help? And she always responded with, oh, I don't want to bother them, and all of that kind of stuff. And I'm just like, but that's what they're there for. They're there to help. Like, if you don't ask for what you need, you're not gonna get it.
Like, that's what I'm talking about. The school beforehand, I was like, the problem is, or was in our school, that because especially in our department, because there's so many different disabilities, to get to our Senko is super hard.
Yeah. So you just kind of like that independence, as I guess everyone does. Would you say that's true?
In a school setting, yes.
So you like to be independent in a school setting, but what about outside of school?
Many people try and be more independent and help me out whereas in school, it's sometimes really hard to change things. And then when you do, say, try change things, they're like, and then they don't work out. They're like, oh, but you wanted this change and blah, blah, blah. So it's sometimes having changes put in place isn't so easy. That's why for some time now, I have also had problems with accepting changes.
What sort of changes are you talking about?
In the terms of support, in the terms of being able to join the others, in the terms of people knowing more, like not being afraid of coming up to me, and knowing that although I'm different, I'm still their peer. But then there's the other side of this the school, and also outside of the school, from very close friends that are like, oh, you need to have able-bodied friends. So there's pressure. There's sometimes a lot of pressure from both sides. So sometimes it's just easier for me to be independent when I talk about being independent, is being heard, and sometimes being left unheard, just being left to do what I want to do and what I know that is best for me, and not just being judged from everyone everywhere.
Yeah, I kind of feel like that's also something that you experience quite often when you're really young as well. Like, people just stare at you, and because you're so young, you don't understand why they're staring at you until you realize that you're not like everyone else.
Yeah.
You don't have that concept that you're different.
I don't know if it is the same with you guys, but to me, growing up, I felt a lot safer in a hospital environment.
Ooh, don't get me started on that, Jules.
Where I saw other kids or other young people, not only in wheelchairs, but just with a disability in general. And I feel like that kind of was my slow introduction to the world of disability. And it only got bigger and got wider as I got up in school and college.
I think we wanted to talk about some accessibility issues. So what does your disability make you struggle with?
A lot of the time is street, and obviously I don't walk, so I don't walk, I use crutches. So uneven pavements, I hate them. And I also have to really often use trains. And as you mentioned in one of your episodes, although you text them or you call the train station and book your assistant, sometimes they do not show up.
And also, you also walk slow, don't you? Do you, because when you go on trains, right, and I'm sure you haven't, traveled solo, but just thinking about traveling solo, does that scare you?
Yes, very much so. Because as even with my disability as it is, I still sometimes stick out with the fact that many kids find their their own age group friends, whereas my friends are either older than me, being one example being you, Julia, or very much younger than me. So I have no one relying on me, and then I have a really hard time of making friendships because of the way some people think of my disability and the time that in secondary school I had able-bodied friends and how they then decided to unfortunately break off of me and not tell me anything.
And I kind of feel like that hurts a lot more for us as a disabled community, because let's be honest, we all had our fair share of fake friends. And I remember speaking to Joel about this with my, other able-bodied friends, that we kind of don't realize what's a true friendship and what's a fake friendship. Especially for me in secondary school, I was very much naive, I would say. And then it only took up until the pandemic, where we were all forced to be online in school, that I realized that my friends friends, quotation marks, don't really care about me as much as I thought they did. And, for me, instead of, for them to break off a friendship, the fake friends hurt a lot more than me breaking off that friendship, because I knew that their so-called friendship was not worth it.
If you could change something in society to make it more accessible, what would you change?
That's a hard question. I would change a lot.
Give us 3 things, top 3 of yours.
I think definitely put more workshops in schools about disabilities.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that should be just taught in general in school.
Yeah.
2, although mental health has been a big thing, still needs improvement. And 3, I think we shouldn't be pushed to we're not being pushed, but still need more improvement of being allowed to show our differences and understand that people can change for the better or for the worse.
In what way?
Be allowed to show
in a way that over time people can have different needs.
And in terms of inaccessibility, so train stations are a big one that me and Joel are passionate about. Lack of lifts, stairs, not step-free access, stuff like that. And I also don't feel like, especially major schools, like how do I say this? No, like schools that don't have experienced disabled people don't really think about places to go and trips, and don't think about, will those students be able to access this?
No, you go first.
And I'm quite thankful also at the time, especially in primary school, I was in my manual chair. So the old lifting happened of, people lifting the chair with me up, a little bit of stairs. But once it got to me being in a power chair, it just got a whole lot harder.
3 people getting you down the stairs.
6 at least.
Oh yeah, 6 or 4. Well, I remember that one.
I'm talking about my electric chair, Joel. There was a time where a fire alarm. No.
Oh no! It was the lift wasn't working. You remember that time where
my goodness.
We literally was about to send a letter to the people that were fixing the lift.
Yeah, there was a time where I think, because we had 3 floors in our secondary school. Ironically, I was on the 3rd floor. Ironically. and thankfully Natalia was on the first floor, so she could walk down, wasn't
Yeah.
it?
Yep. Yeah,
Either you walked down or you went on the evac chair. And for me,
if I was on the evac chair, I have to be on the 3rd floor because that was the only time I used the evac chair, and I will
and
never
also
use it.
the evac chair was only on the 3rd floor too. Our
Yeah.
school was great, Joel. Can you tell?
Mm.
And for me to get down from the 3rd floor, I think there was like 6 male teachers that literally like carried me down the stairs with my electric chair. Do you see how people's thinking skills work? Apparently, it just frustrates me, honestly.
Yeah.
Frustrates.
Understandable.
Natalie, when you were going to secondary school, did you know about any other schools closer to you? Because me and you traveled quite far to go to secondary school.
There was schools that claimed to have support for special needs. When we went there, I would not claim that as a special needs support school. And I don't mean special needs school. I mean mainstream schools that had special needs. We when we went to the school, there wasn't, like, even in the way the students behaved and the TAs and stuff, the teachers and staff behaved, it just shown that the school wasn't, able to help me.
So next thing we talked about is mental health.
It's one of the last things we'll cover in this episode, and it's a bit of a big topic. I guess I want to ask, really, how does your physical disability affect your mental health? I know that you've spoken a little bit about your anxiety.
It started off as the fact that people with CP have trouble balancing their emotions. So we have a tendency to have higher emotions to the actual situation we're facing, which then can lead to anxiety and then depression. As I said, I was, I don't know how to phrase this because I wasn't self-diagnosed or fully diagnosed, but I was said to have anxiety when I was when was your 8? That would be your 12, right?
Yeah.
When I was 12.
No,
12 or
2016.
13. Huh?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So around 12 or 13.
Okay. Yeah. So I was probably, I was 12. So 12. Not bad. My math skills.
Is it 13, 14?
No. Because year 7 is
Year 7 is 12.
No, it's 11 and 12.
So I was technically said to have anxiety when I was 14. 14? 13? Something around that. And then I had a workshop to help me with that. Then, unfortunately, two years ago, I had an absolute increase of anxiety because of what happened, which I hate being treated that way because one of the people decided to not tell me that they're doing something and then decided to, when I found out, they were like, oh, nothing happened. And I'm like, don't lie to me. I know what just actually happened. That some people I noticed think that telling lies because some people are disabled and don't understand will save us mental health. It doesn't work like that. And yeah, and then so mainly going back to the main question is that my when I get really anxious, I can get really stiff, which then interrupts the whole physical impact of being mobile, being able to walk, basically.
Yeah, I remember there was a few times where I could tell that you were struggling with walking with your crutches. And also another time was also when we shared the transport together and long journey, stuff like that. Like that kind of also made you a bit anxious, didn't it?
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Natalie, for coming on and being our guest. It's been lovely to talk to you. But for now, goodbye from me, Joel Sprouse.
And me, Julia Shenko.
Thank you for joining us. Goodbye.
Bye.